Okay, so let's get these numbers straight here. During the course of this pandemic so far, over 50 million Americans have filed for unemployment. Over 5.4 million Americans have lost their health care, being pushed off of their health insurance. And of course, now we're in a situation where over 92 million Americans are either uninsured or underinsured. And where's Elon Musk? Well, of course, Elon Musk, his net worth has tripled. Mark Zuckerberg, his net worth has gone up over $10 billion. And Jeff Bezos, where is he in this equation? Well, now he's on track to be the world's first trillionaire. Well, not if Bernie Sanders has anything to say about it. Bernie Sanders is teaming up with Kirsten Gillibrand and Ed Markey to pass the Make Billionaires Pay Act. Now, this bill is going to be a one-time tax on billionaires only, so fewer than 500 Americans will experience this tax at all, and it's only going to tax them on the money which they've made during the course of this pandemic. So the money which they made from March 18th to August 5th is the sort of time capsule which they're counting here. That money there will be taxed at a rate of 60%. And what's the money going to? It's going to go to make sure that all Americans' out-of-pocket healthcare expenses are covered. Now, this is a really big deal, guys. This is a really good thing because, of course, the amount of money which will be generated by this tax will be enormous because, of course, we've seen the stock market absolutely explode because, of course, that's the thing which they rushed in to save first. That was the thing when the pandemic started hitting and when the stock market started going down, they sent trillions and trillions of dollars into liquidity to hold up the market. They sent trillions and trillions of dollars to make sure that the stock market didn't completely collapse, which, by the way, it collapsed anyway, but now it's rebounding. While, of course, in Congress, the Republicans are still squabbling over whether or not they're going to be willing to extend a $600 checks to the 30 million Americans who depend on that check during the course of this pandemic because, of course, they were told you can't work. You've got to stay home for the sake of public safety, but then they couldn't extend the money to make sure that people could be all right during this time, that we could make it through during this time. So I want to make it really clear here. This is not just a tax on billionaires. It's also an attempt to correct, at least a little bit, some of the mistakes which Congress has already made. Some of the mistakes which Congress made where they spent too much time, spent too much energy on a giveaway to the ultra-rich and not enough money to the average everyday worker. This is not just, again, a tax to make sure that billionaires are contributing and paying their fair share. It's also an attempt to at least partially correct a number of the mistakes which have been made in Congress where their legislation during the course of this pandemic have been primarily aimed at benefiting the wealthy and not enough at benefiting everyday workers. Guys, this is a really good bill. This is a good step forward. Now, of course, you could argue maybe it should be a little bit more, maybe it should cover a larger window, but guys, this bill in and of itself is going to be hard to get through, even just the Senate. Even just this bill is going to face enormous opposition from Republicans who, again, are still squabbling over whether or not they're going to be willing to extend $600 checks to everyday workers. So let's take a look at some of the other details in this bill to get a better grasp of what's going on in this bill. So as I was saying here, the bill was introduced by Ed Markey and Kirsten Gillibrand of New York on Thursday. It's the Make Billionaires Pay Act, and the funds will be used to pay out-of-pocket healthcare expenses for all Americans during the year, during, of course, the pandemic crisis. So I want to take a look at some of the stuff which Bernie Sanders said on Twitter when he was announcing the bill, because I think that it's really good, and I think it explains quite clearly where Bernie Sanders is coming from and why this is such a good idea. So this was from a few days ago here, but he was saying, I will be introducing legislation tomorrow to tax the obscene wealth gains which billionaires have made during this public health crisis. What I think many people do not fully understand is that not everyone is hurting in America. Not everyone needs the Senate to act. And of course, right now, again, what's he referring to here? While 30 million Americans have seen their $600 a week unemployment benefits expire, emergency action taken by the Federal Reserve to prop up the stock market have meant that the 467 billionaires saw their wealth go up over $730 billion since the pandemic began. $730 billion. So again, this is not just about taxing the wealthy and taxing the rich. This is also about making up for the fact that the Federal Reserve took actions to first help the stock market, to first help the rich, to first help the people who were probably not going to suffer the most anyway. That was the first group of people who were helped, and so it's trying to correct a little bit of that, because if it weren't for government action there, if it weren't for government action into the economy there, then those billionaires wouldn't have got nearly as much of a massive windfall during the pandemic as they ended up getting. And by the way, of course, Elon Musk didn't really need that anyway. If Elon Musk only had $1 billion, which of course now he's on track, I think he has like $70 billion, right? Even if he only had $1 billion, he would still be plenty plenty well off. Guys, $1 billion is 1,000 million. If you had a bank account in your bank account and it said $1 million, I imagine that you'd be sitting there, my bank account's pretty good right now. Well, imagine having 1,000 of those. So Elon Musk was never going to be in a situation where during this pandemic he was going to be in trouble. Never, not for one moment, was he worried in that sense, because he knew that he was going to be perfectly fine. Same for Jeff Bezos, same for Mark Zuckerberg, and all the other billionaires out there. And again, it's the Federal Reserve which created this situation where they're making so much money during the course of this thing, because Congress, in their ideological angles, what they were trying to do was help the rich first, help their wealthy donors first. And those were the first people who got help during the pandemic. And now Bernie Sanders is saying, hold up, maybe we should correct some of those mistakes which we had. So then Bernie Sanders goes on to say, let me repeat that. 467 people have seen their wealth go up by $730 billion. Guys, that's more than $1 billion on average per billionaire. Guys, obscene, completely obscene. So again, Bernie Sanders then kind of just goes through some of the stuff which has been going on during the course of this pandemic here. You can see here Bernie saying, meanwhile, during the last 4 months, while the very, very rich have become much, much richer, American households have seen their wealth go down by 6.5 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars. American households overall. So overall, you look at the broad swath of America, our wealth has been going down. Our wealth has lost $6.5 trillion. But of course, the billionaires, their wealth is way, way up because of what they've done to prop up the stock market, what they've done to prop up the ultra rich. And Bernie Sanders continuing here, in all likelihood, in the midst of everything else, we are currently witnessing what is likely the greatest transfer of wealth from the middle class and the poor to the rich in modern history of this country. In other words, in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of an economic meltdown for working families, in the midst of a great struggle regarding systemic racism, police brutality, in the midst of an existential threat of climate change, in the midst of a president undermining democracy and moving us towards an authoritarian government, in the midst of all of that, we are seeing a massive increase in income and wealth inequality and the movement in this country towards oligarchy. So then Bernie Sanders goes on to give us a few examples. When he talks about how Amazon is denying paid sick leave and hazard pay and personal protective equipment for its 450,000 workers. Jeff Bezos, his wealth has increased over $70 billion. Again, Jeff Bezos on track to be the world's first trillionaire with a T, no longer a B, but with a T. And of course, again, he's denying hazard pay, he's denying sick pay, he's denying personal protective equipment to his workers, when even Jeff Bezos personally, of his personal money, not the Amazon money, but of his personal money, he could make sure that all those workers are safe. He could make sure that all those workers had good health care. He could make sure that all his workers, all the people who he is supposed to be taking care of, who it's his job to take care of them, it's his moral responsibility to take care of them. He isn't doing any of that. He's just pocketing all that money. He's just pocketing all that money and taking it from his workers, stealing it from the workers so that the workers are forced into these conditions because, of course, right now it's so difficult to find another job. They might even feel, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I didn't even lose my job. And of course, all he does is he just exploits the opportunity to steal more and more money from his workers and steal their work. And it's completely disgusting what Jeff Bezos, what billionaires do across this country. While, of course, the U.S. taxpayers are subsidizing the starvation wages of Walmart, our nation's largest private employer, the Walton family has made over $20 billion during the pandemic and now has a net worth of over $200 billion. The Walton family, though, of course, the wealthiest family in this country, their wealth, one family, has increased over $200 billion. And of course, again, Americans are subsidizing their starvation wage. Walmart wouldn't be able to pay the wages that they are paying right now if it weren't for the benefits which we provide for Walmart workers, which everyone else doles out to make sure that those workers are safe, are okay. Walmart, they're not willing to pay those wages because those wages would be too high. If we had to pay that much money, then our profits would go down. So this is really a situation where this is the right step. This is definitely, without a doubt, the proper way to make sure that billionaires can kick in and pay their fair share. You know, one of the things that I always hear from billionaires, one of the things that you always hear on TV when billionaires are talking is, you know, they start whining, they start crying, oh, us billionaires, we're persecuted. Wah. They start crying about the fact, they start complaining that Americans are critical of billionaires, that this new environment where we're criticizing billionaires is just toxic, it's anti-rich, and they feel like they're being persecuted. And they say, we're Americans too, you should listen to us, you should care about us. You know, the one thing that I do agree in those sentences, in those words, is when they say they're Americans too. I agree that they're an American too, and that's why they need to kick in and pay their fair share of wealth. They need to kick in and pay their fair share to make sure that the rest of America, that we're all okay, to make sure that everyday workers, to make sure that everybody out there, all of you out there, are safe and are okay, and make sure that you have food in your stomach. We also saw the report coming out that millions of Americans right now are struggling with food, that millions of Americans had to choose between rent and food at some point during the course of this month. We are in the midst of an evictions crisis right now. It's happening today. It is happening right now. So this is a complete disaster. And of course, the billionaires who claim to be true Americans, who claim to be true patriots, they are not kicking in to pay their fair share. And guys, by the way, part of the problem really is Congress. Part of the problem really is the fact that Congress is unwilling to even tax the billionaires the way that they need to be taxed. So this is a step in the right direction. It's a step. You can argue, and I would agree, that it's not quite enough. However, it's certainly a step, and even just this is going to be a very difficult bill, and it's going to be an uphill battle. But I think if we keep fighting, maybe we'll have a shot. All right, you guys, that's the video. If you liked it, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.